what do you know more about the exploitation of these individuals who are some who want to come here and actually just seek opportunities in America?
Kids, luckily Border Patrol agents were keeping an eye on individuals and recognized, and that's how we determined it was happening. I had one individual that was in my jail that needed dialysis 3 times a day. It just about broke our budget from $6,000 up to, I've heard, up to $15,000. Then you'll probably be exploited for that portion. It just gives more money for more Border Patrol agents to process more people, because it limits the fact that those 5,000 have to be from a contiguous country.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Can you explain more about exploitation? How is the cartel doing that? What are they threatening with, or what do you know more about the exploitation of these individuals who are some who want to come here and actually just seek opportunities in America?
Right. So what we see is typically an individual, depending on what country, the range here is anywhere from $6,000 up to, I've heard, up to $15,000 per individual, depending on what country you're from. If an individual cannot afford that, then they will be emboldened to pay the cartel if they're allowed to come in and be smuggled in. So that cartel will designate where they go and what job they will do and how much that cartel will charge them when they get there for the place to live and the food and everything else. And if you're a female, then you'll probably be exploited for that portion. If you're a male, and we've seen it before, U.S. Border Patrol tracked down a group that I believe went into the Carolinas, and they were actually paying off their debt, some of them by doing yard work. So they were working for companies there where they had to work so many hours a day doing yard work for these different landscaping companies to pay their debt to the cartels.
So they're already in the United States and they're already finding work just to pay off their debts from being crossed illegally through the cartel network.
Well, because it's a cartel-run organization that's doing the landscaping business. So they're coordinating all this. They're pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
And some you will be tasked with smuggling narcotics into the U.S. Some will portray themselves as a family unit. And if you're a kid, they found where kids, luckily Border Patrol agents were keeping an eye on individuals and recognized, and that's how we determined it was happening, is they were recycling their kids to pay off their debt. So if a family came across with a child, they knew that you could get into this country and be allowed in. You weren't going to be sent back because you're a family. So these folks would take their child, send it back to that country, and then that child would come back again with a different group of people, portraying it as a family unit. And that was how they were paying off their debt there. So they utilize all kinds of different ways of exploiting individuals when they come across.
So recently, the House GOP effectively rejected the bipartisan legislation to address the border crisis. What was your opinion about that legislation, and why do you think it wasn't passed?
Well, number one, to give you a little history, sheriffs, when Secretary Mayorkas first came on, the border sheriffs, along with national sheriffs, sat down with Mayorkas and said, look, here's a 16-point plan of success for you. We've all been on the border most of our lives and served our communities for a very long time. You have hundreds of years of experience in law enforcement, sitting here willing to work with you side by side to show you a success. He took that 16-point plan and he never even remembered getting it a year later. So that was our first introduction to Secretary Mayorkas on that. Number two, we have been educating our senators, all of us along the border, on what's needed. Again, when you see politicians in Washington, D.C., I think they tend to lose focus on the fact that they're there to serve the people, not their interest in Washington and their personal and political ideologies should not be interjected into public safety. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that 300+ page bill.
I haven't looked at the full thing, no.
Yeah, I was going through it yesterday. You mixed law enforcement in with budgeting money from the military to go to Ukraine and to Russia and Taiwan, or not Russia, I'm sorry, to Israel and Taiwan. So that's the first part of this bill. The second part basically goes into changing a lot of the immigration laws, which we're not part of the immigration side. That's not our bailiwick. We don't want it, to be honest with you. But when you read it, everything that they're saying, so they're trying to claim that if there's more than 5,000 a day that come across the border, then they can shut the border down. Well, even the president told the American citizens, I watched him say it, that he needs a law so he can do that. Well, that's not true, because there's already a law that's been in effect for many, many years. INA 212F gives the president the ability to shut down the border. So in our profession, when you lie, you die. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So he's already got the ability as a president in law to shut this down. You're just not going to do it. It's all politics. And that's unfortunate.
Well,
and that's why we put out a presser on why we don't support this bill, because it doesn't address anything as far as law enforcement and enforcing the rule of law. It just gives more money for more Border Patrol agents to process more people, because it limits the fact that those 5,000 have to be from a contiguous country. If it's a non-contiguous country, then that doesn't apply. They can't be counted. You see what I'm getting at? So
I got you.
I've got 160 countries that are not contiguous to Arizona and Mexico coming in here. They wouldn't be counted.
What?
So you got to look at the law and how they wrote it. You could drive a Mack truck through this thing. I mean, it has nothing to do with enforcing the rule of law. I average about $1.2 million in cost for housing illegal aliens in my jail that have committed state crimes. It's an impact on every sheriff across this country. And we're supposed to get reimbursed by the federal government for that. But the only way that we can ask for reimbursement is if that individual has 2 misdemeanor charges or 1 felony charge and has to be in my jail for more than 4 days. So that's their way of limiting reimbursement to us as sheriffs. So out of those 450 people that were in my jail, they were from 20 different countries. But because they didn't meet that criteria, I get reimbursed 5 cents on the dollar. And that doesn't even count my medical costs. They won't reimburse medical.
Right.
I had one individual that was in my jail that needed dialysis 3 times a day. It just about broke our budget. But they won't reimburse you for that. So these are the impacts that sheriffs all across this country are experiencing. And that's under the State Criminal Alien Apprehension Program.
Yeah.
Well, we're supposed to get reimbursed fully on that. Well, I could go on.
No,
all
you
day
could. I mean, we could go on for a while. There's a lot of here.
We can.